hello again. Thank you very much, Mikhail and Marit, for the nice introduction and the presentation. And I can only repeat very warm welcome to all the participants in the River University. My name is Maria Falaleeva. I am working as an expert on climate change adaptation, urban areas. And I also represent organization EKAPRAEKT in Belarus, which is a part of Coalition of Clean Baltic. And like for you, this is for me, like many of you, it's the first time presenting for River University. And this is a pleasure. And I think you will have, and I hope, and I'm sure you will have a very fruitful week, and you will really learn a lot. So my presentation is about the climate change and urban water infrastructure, because Baltic is all about water, but also it's one of the most densely populated area in Europe. So it's very much related to all the problems that we have is very much related to urban area. But before even I will start to talk about water and the city, I would like to make a little quest with you. And I think I will need help from Marit and from Mikhail. And the question is, now you see there's a very familiar picture of 17 Sustainable Development Goal. And if you look once more at all of them, can you suggest where is the water and in the city? Which SDGs are related to the subject of water in the city? Any suggestions?
In many.
Okay, exactly. I think the right answer in many, and my answer will be in absolutely all. And if you can just say the few clue and about what kind of, let's say, which SDGs, I would say, except of SDG 6, because SDG 6 is obviously about the water, which SDGs would be related to the subject of water and the climate? Okay, I hope by the end of the River University, you will be able to answer these questions kind of more actively. I think it's everybody is arriving mentally and physically to the class, so it's only starting. However, if we take any, just for example, I'm looking now on the SDG 10, reduced inequalities. Does it relate to water and climate change? Of course, yes, because access of water is one of the key right and one of the key problems in many cities. It's not only developing country, but also in developed country. It's also about life of land. It's also about, well, climate change, life below the water, of course. And it's about clean energy, zero hunger. So everything, every SDG is somehow related to the subject of water. And also many of them are related to the subject of urban development. So, which means that the question of water in the city is very, very complex. And this is one of the really kind of penetrating issues. And we need to deal with this in a very complex manner. However, this complexity is even further increased because during the last year and for decades to come, we have one of the key risks is a climate change. I won't stop too much on these slides. I think you all are very familiar with the diagram on the right, on the left. And our main message is that the climate is changing, and this is one of the main risks for societies and for the economy. And unfortunately, now we are not even nearly on the relatively safe path, which is plus 1.5, plus 0.2 degrees to the end of this century. So what does it mean for us? This means that we both in all sectors, we both need to mitigate possible impacts of climate change, reduce greenhouse emission, and we need to adapt to the consequences of climate change. And this, as I said before, makes the situation even more complex. So what about Baltic Sea region? How all these relate to the Baltic? If we speak about the main impacts of climate change into the Baltic, I think the main feature that we need to keep into account. This is a quite uncertain and quite ambiguous, I would say, because for many regions in the world and the consequences of climate change can be very notable, even catastrophic. However, we more or less know what the impacts will be. For example, the sea level rise, or risk of droughts, or risk of floods. If we look at the Baltic is not too big region to compare to the global scale. However, in terms of the climate change, the Baltic will face a quite diverse change in conditions. But first of all, let's look at the, let's say, sea level rise. Sea level rise is one of the main climate risks for the coastal area. However, in Baltic, the situation is quite slightly different, because the Baltic is naturally slightly and very slowly rising due to geological processes. The sea level rise can be distributed quite uneven. And for example, as we see in the different scenarios, level of sea level rise is quite different. And some region in the Baltic would experience more impacts of sea level rise, some less. And for some region, it could be even slightly so that the sea level rise due to the climate change will be compensated by natural kind of rise of the territories. And if we look at this, another classical case of water and climate impacts, this is a daily river discharge, and which define the risk of floods and the risk of droughts. It's not only but one of the factor which is really kind of impact the risk of floods and droughts. So we see the situation in the Baltic is also quite different. So in some rivers, the daily river discharge will increase. In some rivers, it will decrease. So what does it all mean? It means that in the Baltic Sea region, from country to country, even from region to region in the different countries, and from cities to cities, we need to design and our unique measures to adapt and to mitigate climate change. So in this case, of course, we need to cooperate. We need to know what's going on in other regions, what's going on in other cities. However, there is no recipe which would fit all, and everybody in their city and all of you in your region will need to design the very specific and custom-made solutions. Another level of this complexity is urban areas and urban population. As you see, the urban, as in many countries in the world, the urban population in Baltic is very much distributed along the coasts. So all impacts related to climate change will be very relevant to the coast and coastal cities. However, also lots of cities in Baltic Sea countries, and for example, you can see it on example, especially on example of Poland, are distributed not close to the coast, however, within the river basins. So everything is important. It's very important and risky to be located by the coast. It's also not less risky to be located within the river valleys. So this is like everything is measured. And again, we need to make custom-made solutions for climate change and water in the Baltic. So how the Baltic Sea cities can respond to uncertainties and controversial changes and become climate resilient, which means able to adapt, and water-wise. Water-wise, what does it mean to be water-wise? We will talk slightly later. Climate impacts on urban water infrastructure. So as you will see, maybe as you can understand already for the introductory part, the cities in the Baltic Sea region face three main challenges. First, it can be too little water and the risk of droughts, deficit of drinking water, and so on. It can be too much water and it can be risk of flood. It can be also too much water can impact the water quality as well. So, and water quality, water supply, first of all, is for population, but also for industrial processes is a key. So how we can balance all three? So for complex problems, we need complex solutions. And if we look at the water strategy, sustainable water strategies in the city, we can see there are really several factors, except of pure climate change and precipitation influence the risks. And first of all, of course, is climate and specific climate, and this is location also, as we talked before. This is also purely planning factors like urban structure and urban surfaces. And for this little picture, you can see how much the quality and how much the character of urban surfaces actually influence the discharge, and this is the infiltration on the water in the ground. And this is, for example, if we, from the slide, like you can see that, for example, the sealed surfaces, that, for example, alpha, asphalt, and the pavement can drastically increase the discharge of water from urban areas. And so more water go in the drain, more risk of the floods. And if we have a different type of surfaces, first of all, it's a green areas, but also this is especially designed that's so-called like porous surfaces which can let the water through. So these surfaces can let the water off the urban surface. And first of all, we have additional benefit of supporting vegetation. But second, we have a much less risk of floods, and also we have a much less risk of droughts, because the water doesn't go to the drain. The water is stored inside the urban areas, urban soil. And of course, it's an urban development, the way how you develop your city. Do you build in the risky area, or you analyze the risks for years to come and you try to build in a safer places? And of course, the water management. The water management define both mitigation, how much greenhouse reduction we can get from the water sector, but of course, adaptation to the new climate conditions. So this is just, I already told about this. This is just a fine kind of funny cartoons images, how the direct runoff of the storm water can negatively or positively impact the water management in the city. On the top picture, you see the city, which you can recognize the most of our cities at the moment. So which means the water is collected in a drain, and sometimes not clean and untreated go to the rivers. And for bottom picture, we can see how the sustainable sewage system can collect and store water in the city. And I'm sure that during this next week, you also will discuss this, because the sustainable water system is one of the key solutions for climate change and water in the city. And everything needs to be integrated in one system. So except of climate adaptation and reducing risk of floods and droughts, we also need to reduce the greenhouse emission from the water sector. Well, to be honest, the water sector, it's not one of the key emission source for greenhouse gas emission, because of course, like the industry and especially energy production, transport as a sector can emit much more. However, strangely enough, in the water sector, we have a quite high potential in reducing greenhouse gas emission. So why so? Because in the water sector, the main sources of greenhouse gas emission, it's so-called potent greenhouse gases, which is methane and nitrogen oxide. Because the methane has way more, 34 times more greenhouse gas capacity than the classical CO2, and the nitrogen oxide have a way more. It's like almost 300 more greenhouse effect than CO2. So, and these two gases are the main the main sources of greenhouse gas emission. So if we reduce them even slightly, we can have a really very notable reduction of greenhouse gas emission, or greenhouse gas emission and impact on the atmosphere. So this is maybe not so crucial as energy, but a lot can be done in the water sector, and it needs to be taken into account. So we need to adapt to the new condition while increasing the water quality for a growing number of people, and we need to mitigate effect of climate change by reducing greenhouse gas emission. And we can do this. So how we can approach, so that always I think it's obvious that the complex problem need a complex solutions, and there are several complex solutions in this area in the water sector. And all this complexity and water management need to take into account several factors. First, as we said, it should be not too little water, but not too much water. Second, this solution needs to combine climate adaptation and climate mitigation. They need to embrace different type of measures. This is a gray measure, technological, green measure, ecosystem-based solution, and soft measure. This is a policy, education, finance, everything that you cannot call green and gray. So these group soft measures, sometimes called like blue measures, and it's a bit unfair that we have only one group for them because they're really, really diverse. However, this is like green, gray, blue, or soft measures. This is a more or less classical division of and classical type of measures that you can find in the literature. And I'm sure that you heard of them or you will hear of them at some point. So urban development and climate resilience, we need to develop our city, but we need to be able to make them safe. Also safe to the climate and all factors related to this, increasing maybe possible migration, mind and remember our first picture with SDG, maybe possible migration of people, maybe shortage of drinking water, maybe changing in economical condition. And on the top of that, we need to make it climate resilient. So use the local knowledge and innovation because every situation is unique, again, as we discussed before. And this using local knowledge and addressing such a, I would say, mad level of complexity, we need to involve different stakeholders, which is the city administration, public, business, finance, and so on and so on. So fortunately, we have lots of approaches developed by now. I should say that none of them are easy. Lots of them are costly, but the good news are we can do this. So, and one of the classical approach to the managing water in the city, it's so-called sustainable urban drainage system, SUDC, DS. So they are classical example of green measures or nature-based solution. However, if we look closer at the sustainable urban drainage system, it's not only green. It uses ecosystem and green areas as a sort of vehicle, as an ecosystem services. However, to make them work, you really need to introduce lots of smart gray measures because you cannot just let water stay in the urban areas. You need to clean it, you need to direct it. So it requires quite a lot of really smart technical solutions. And of course, you need a lot of soft measures to make it work because you need to have a lot of planning, finance, and just to protect and to make the system work, you really need a lot of local involvement because somebody needs to maintain it. For example, the city or consulting company or infrastructural company, they can set up the system, but this is such a sensitive system that needs everyday maintenance. And this is practically impossible for involving of citizens and local administration. So this is a really combination of both. So, but what it can provide us, it can, for example, based on the rain gardens, it can harvest the rainwater, it can create temporarily flood spaces, which is really interesting solutions. And I think you will maybe discuss it during the next days and lectures. This is preamble surface. This is this porous surface that we discussed before, and the green roofs. And the good news, each of these solutions, including green roofs, can be implemented now in the countries with a really different climates, because sometimes we think that all the rain gardens or green roofs, it's only for warmer countries. However, we have now the good example even in the countries with the 4 seasons like Sweden, we have quite a good example of green roofs, which needs again specially made technical solutions. But good news, it's a bad news, but good news is possible. So this is example how it may look in the reality. So you can say this is not, because sometimes you can see the picture of sustainable drainage system, it's all flowers and beautiful gardens and so on. Well, in reality, let's say it can look quite different. It can look very attractive aesthetically, but it can look like a quite technical infrastructure areas. However, the good news, if you again add the technology and design to the solution, you can make an area look quite nice aesthetically. And so you can again, as we say, that kill several birds in one stone, and you can also create a very effective, very attractive recreational area and social spaces in the city. based on sustainable urban drainage system. So in fact, so this is a drain ditch, if you can see on the left bottom picture. However, it looks quite interesting, and this really provide better site and also better adaptation capacity for your neighborhood. One of the solution for greenhouse gas emission reduction in the city. So there are several solutions how you can actually reduce greenhouse gas emission in the water sector in the city. First of all, improve energy efficiency of water treatment, which can give us up to 40% of greenhouse gas reduction in the sector. And improve water efficiency, so that use water more smart, more effective. Reuse nutrients. First of all, it's of course on the water treatment facility. Recover energy, which is also possible on the water treatment facilities. And of course, treat more wastewater and apply a principle of circular economy. As you can see from the small blue numbers, all these solution can result in a quite important, quite a notable reduction of the greenhouse gas emission in the city. And another thing is how we can combine all these measures. And for this, we have relatively new concept, which calls the Waterwise City. And in the moment, we have several cities around the globe which want to be a waterwise, and they even form the association IWA, which is, I think it's a Waterwise City Association. And you can, if you're interested in the documents and solution, integrated I think it's Integrated Waterwise City Association. So you can look at this closer, because as many international organizations now, they have a lot of practical examples and also like very nice materials to look at. And so the Waterwise City needs to, the principles of Waterwise cities is it needs to integrate 4 different factors. First, it's the water services need to be regenerated. Urban design has to be water sensitive, include the principles of water mitigation and adaptation. And it should be basin connected city. And now we have a very clear link to the river basins and integrated water management. And it should have a waterwise community. So communities need to be involved in the water management. So, and then it's like based on this principle, we can make an integrated waterwise city plan, which would also include the principles of climate change adaptation and mitigation. But of course, like it's very important that these plans should be very closely integrated to the development of the cities in general, because you cannot just create a pretty document without the connection to the real challenges of your city and the real economic development goals. So just a few examples. I will be very quick because the time is also running. So is this new idea implemented in the reality? So the answer is yes. Of course, not whole complexity. No one city in the world, I think, cannot call them climate and water resilient so far. However, we have a good examples. That, for example, one example, and for examples, if you look for examples for your projects and just for an inspiration, I would strongly recommend you to check the resources, the Baltic Smart Water Hub. I have no personal connection to this resource, so I cannot kind of like advise you more on this. However, if you really look, for example, just go look no further, they have a really nice collection of case studies. So that, for example, in Riga, there is a plan to establish like one integrated system of multifunctional green and blue area corridor, which would kind of penetrate the city and which would support this system of climate adaptive effective water management and water management of green areas. As we say that we called it green blue corridor. And I think it's very in the modern city planning, we all more speak about green blue solutions than just purely green solution, because green solution and blue solution for water always goes hand in hand. As you can see, these projects are quite costly. However, I don't want to stop on this now, but however, there are several estimations that in a long term, this investment really kind of pay for itself, because you save a lot. You save a lot in terms of energy, you save a lot of in terms of the climate adaptation, risk reduction, and of course, you really the first group which benefit from this solution is the people and their health and quality of their life. And another interesting example, it's from Stockholm. This is stormwater management in Stockholm city. This is the example of elements of sustainable drainage system. And if you can see that from the left picture and from the right picture, this is more or less the same area, and this is the same, even the same tree, I suppose. And the project in Stockholm was aimed to retain the water in the area. So create this preamble surface, but also introduce a smart system of cleaning run water. So they apply special membranes, which would first kind of keep the water, but also clean the water. So the water can be sort of safe enough to feed the tree. So as I say that, I really encourage you to look for this example itself, yourself. So maybe to create a new example, so that will be fantastic. I think this is why we are here for. And I think based on that, and for the next week and for the next year to come, I would really like you to reflect on 3 questions. What is a solution from your cities? What is the challenges from your cities? And maybe share with a colleague insights from your cities. I think this all what I would like to tell now as an introduction. As I said, look yourself, look for resources like Baltic Smart Water Hub and platform for sustainable water management in the Baltic Sea region. For those of you who read Russian, I can suggest to find more information in my book, New City for New Climate, Новый город для нового климата. And you are very, very welcome. Contact me as other speakers in the event. So thank you very much.